if we removed IVF as an option, if it was just left as you make love, and that's it, that's your only way, would you come to a place better? Because you wouldn't have all been sold the hope. And I think IVF, that hope becomes really toxic and false. And
That
it's
is
all
wow. Oh my gosh, I've
That
never
is so
thought of
true.
that. Oh my
Toxic.
god.
That's brilliant. Welcome to the Full Stop Podcast with Berenice Smith from Walking Our Shoes, Sarah Lawrence from After the Storm, and me, Michael Hughes from Married and Childless. If this is your first time here, our podcast is centred around supporting the childless not by choice community, and our aim is to be a focal point for that community, and with all our special guests show you how to manage your grief and the issues specific to us, and by example show that a full and happy life can be had without those children we dearly wanted. Now, we slated this episode as one for the guys, and our great friend Andy Harrod specifically asked if we could discuss worthiness, as Stephanie Phillips' World Childless Week 2020 had just finished and it resonated with him. Now, the result of our chat took us way off base, and it ended up as a type of group therapy session, and I think you will agree, we all needed it. Why was you keen on talking about worthiness?
Why was I keen? I think because I've lived for a long time, so pre-trying for kids and then through the trying for kids, with a sense that I'm not quite good enough. And definitely not being able to have children has really layered on top of that and sort of made it louder and noisier. And it doesn't work, that thing of telling myself I'm not good enough, that I've failed with not having kids, that I don't match this sort of societal expectation, sort of criteria, qualityness. If you're not a dad, who are you? That treating it like I've failed, that I'm not worthy, that I don't matter because I don't have sort of children, I don't have grandchildren, that sort of legacy, just was getting me down. It blunted enthusiasm, it sort of blunted joy. It just didn't make sense. But to turn it around and say, I still matter, I am worthy, because having children is one part of you and it's not all of you. And so you still, even as a parent, you still need to matter to yourself. You can't live for your children. And it's possible that I would have been a parent who, through having kids, would have healed that sort of sense of not being good enough, or it could have been I end up living through them. I just don't know. I'd hope to think it's a more healthier way. But I suppose what sort of where I'm going to with this is that it's just one part of my story, and that there's lots of other factors to me, and that in a sense childlessness, it layers on top of what you already know. And so it's hell going through the grief, through the trying, through the disappointment, through the pain, through the losses, and they don't stop once you sort of accept that childless life. And it feels like acceptance is a spectrum where some days I'm accepting and I can get on, other days I accept but I don't like doing that, and it's rawer and things trigger. But being with that difficulty of acceptance and moving on, the plan B, as Jodie calls it, the next chapters, looking at it through sort of eyes of failure, it's just no fun. It's just creating hard work. And before we met, I was doing a bit of writing this morning after breakfast, and it's sort of, when I wrote about this sense of failure, the sense of, and where it may have come from, which is beyond the scope of this sort of podcast, it was like writing through sludge. It was really dull, and it's a grey day here anyway, but it just felt really oof. But then when I sort of started thinking, why is it important that I am worthy, I matter, it sort of felt lighter, more energized, that thinking that, yes, I don't have children, but if I live my life thinking, what an idiot for mucking that up, and I could use obviously a much more colourful language there, but there is this sense of, if I do that, the rest of my life isn't going to be any fun. It's just going to keep repeating the 30s. It's almost like a purgatory, a punishment. And so to say I'm worthy, to say that's what I want to aim for beyond acceptance, sort of an acceptance where, yes, the acceptance may still waver, I may sort of, it may be raw, it may not be. But if I think of it as, well, let's try and make the most of life, let's make the most of me, let's live by the values that matter to me, it just feels like that life opens up, and it does feel bright, it does feel more chance to be energized, energetic, enjoy what I'm doing, rather than at times it feels like going through the motions. I suppose that's the long answer to why I think it's important to feel worthy rather than feel a failure about it, or just feel pissed off about it. It feels like it does need a sort of shift, it does need tackling. And I think, and perhaps at the start, I remember Berenice saying women seem to talk about unworthy more, and I know that through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the groups there, the people who post about childlessness, there's a sort of, it's quite a feminine approach, or quite a soft approach about worthiness, about matter, and I am on more sensitive, soft side, I think, as a man, and so I can connect with that, but I can see also within the sort of what I've been taught about society and how a man should be in it, that's really hard to embrace, because you're sort of seen as weaker, and all sorts of sort of derogatory names and sort of discriminatory names, in the sense of, I remember sort of that thing at school, because you're soft, you're known as gay, and it's like, that's nothing to do with being gay or straight or whatever. These are just sort of qualities, but you end up in a real sort of quandary of, well, that's not who I am, so I can't show that. And then when you get through difficulties like this, and I can see how us men, if we're straight, we're told to be in this sort of way, act like this, that to embrace the softer sides, to say you're worthy, it's sort of risking being bullied or exposed, it feels like to me, because of what previous experience have sort of said about being more in touch with your emotions. So I can see, yes, for men, this is a difficult topic, because it's a bit like crying. We're just told not to. I guess that's sort of, and that's, I suppose, why I sort of wanted to talk about it. Because I think it's important that I get to grips with feeling I matter. But also think, for me, part of the age and part of this legacy thing with the worthiness is also helping other people get to grips with it, also being a voice, because for some reason I feel able to do that. For some reason it seems important to do that. So it sort of feels good to help people who maybe less wanting to do it publicly and in a private way, and sort of just being able to say, it's okay to sort of be soft, or it's okay to like yourself still, even if you can't have kids. That's not the be all and end all. Yeah. I'll stop there and catch my breath.
But it's almost like, I don't have any evidence for it, but it's almost like you're not allowed to think that way in some respects. If a guy was to go around saying, I value myself, I'm a good guy, I value myself, I do lots of good things, our society is not set up for that. Particularly here in Australia, we're not set up for that. We have this, I'm not quite sure if you had the same sort of thing in the UK, because it's been a long time since I've lived there, but we have the tall poppy syndrome here, where if you get too big for your boots, you get chopped down. And it keeps everyone on an equal, it's almost like, I guess it's a way of society keeping everyone on an equal plane. So we don't have a class system as such. So if these people get too big for their boots, we'll chop him down. He's got to come back down to our level. But it's so if you were to, I value myself, it would totally not be cool here to do that. Strange. I'm not quite sure if it's the same thing in the UK, but
okay, I was going to say, I think it is, in the sense of there's probably things it's okay to be big about, if you like, or that are accepted as, well, maybe not by by myself or others. But there's a sense that with the politics, I know this is going political now, but it's just what's coming in my head. But with politicians, they seem to be getting away with things because it's sort of blunder and bluster, or it's who we are, that's okay, it's part of me, it's sort of personality type thing. Where if you're sort of kind of like, you think of Corbyn, and don't know his story that well, but there's a sense that what he betrayed, that more equality got shot down, that somehow wasn't right, that isn't for us. And it's almost like people perhaps think those who value themselves are better, think they're better than other people. But if you value yourself, you don't tend to have that ego, where if you think you're above people, you tend to have the ego. And looking at our country, at other countries, that is getting our societies into real trouble. So I can sort of see the need to shoot or cut down the tall poppies if it's an ego thing that's actually detrimental. But when we value ourselves and actually like ourselves from our heart, we tend to be kinder to the world. We tend to be nicer, and that perhaps is, I've seen some advertised recently about leadership in women, and that we need more women leaders, and maybe perhaps part of this is, I can't think of her name, but the Prime Minister of New Zealand,
Jacinda Ardern.
Done with it. Yeah, and she's done really well with the pandemic there, and
she's just won the second term as well by a landslide. The first time in 50 years that the party has actually won in New Zealand without having to form a coalition with someone else. So she's done great guns. Yeah,
and I think people talked about our women prime ministers or women presidents or those in charge of those countries seem to be doing better. But it's not. I don't think it's necessarily being a woman, but it's the construct of what a woman can do compared to what a man can do, and so in a sense, for men to say, "Oh yeah, I like myself from my heart, I matter," and then that allows you to help others and support others, that seems to get shot down as being too big for your boots, I think, where men to have the ego, the sort of the bigness, the sort of, oh, I've got more muscle for you, I can lie better than you, or had affairs, that seemed to be cool, but not for women. So it's unfair. It works both ways. Both men and women get shot down, but I don't really know where I'm going with this now. I'm thinking in that sense of, yeah, I think that unfortunately the tall poppy syndrome thing goes against valuing yourself from the heart, because it's not about ego for me. This is the unworthy, and I think that's maybe part of the trouble when we say we matter or talk about mattering is, oh, is it going to lead us to be selfish and egotistical? But actually, I think you go that way if you don't like yourself as much and you're trying to do things, you're trying to be someone. And I wonder if, and I think that's the problem. I think men in that way, that you're valued more by who you pretend to be than who you actually are. I can't speak for women, but it feels like perhaps with the politicians, if we think of them, that Jacinda, she for some reason she's more at home in herself, and that seems to be the work and is valued. Where if it was a man, I wonder, would it be the same? But we just can't know that. But I feel like me being softer, more emotional, that does feel like I stick out compared to maybe some other men, especially say when I was playing football. Or, yeah, I couldn't imagine ever playing rugby, Luminek, in that sense. But that's again being really stereotypical about people who played rugby, and that's not right either. But it's that sense again that I sort of suit being a counsellor compared to being on a building site, it seems, because maybe of who you have to try and be, even if that's not you. And some people pull it off. Some people maybe not sure they're doing it. And I think that's a big thing for us men to tackle, the stereotype, the sort of the constructions we have for ourselves. And the same for women, because it's almost like women can't be angry. They can't show a more masculine side. That gets shot down. It is really difficult for us with the constructs and the sort of the binariness of it. So you can certainly see where the non-binary is coming from. That yes, biologically we're one or the other, but gender-wise, it really holds us back at times.
I really have enjoyed listening to you, Andy, and the way you've explained that. Because if I talk about myself, I'm even finding it difficult to talk about now, and not because it's emotional, but I'm not quite sure I should say this. But if you was to look at the things that I do, or the pies I've got my fingers in, if you will, I don't talk about that a lot. You know, I don't talk about the fact that, you know, we've got a group called the Clan of Brothers that we're trying to help other men. I mean, if people ask me about the podcast, so I'll look for an opportunity to do that. But, you know, I don't talk too much about being in a podcast to, you know, highlight our community. Then there's other things that I do that I feel I can't talk about because it doesn't go with, you know, hairy, gruff who I am. But one of the things that, but I know on the other hand that Vicky says to me, one of the things she loves about me is the fact that I'm just a big cuddly teddy bear. That, you know, she knows what goes on the inside. And yeah, so I really understand what you're talking about there in that, you know, there's this way that we should be behaving. And, well, there is an expectation of the way that we believe a certain, you know, guy should behave. And if we behave a bit differently, then we find it difficult to express.
Yeah, that really captures it. It just made me think of how we find it hard to be complex, to be both, say, sort of, you could be playing sports and really sort of loud, out there, passionate, in charge, laddie, if you like, jokey in the change room. That'd be one aspect of you, and then at home be the cuddly bear. And you can be both. But it feels like we're told only one is preferred. One makes you the cool kid amongst your mates. And what goes on at home is private and we shouldn't talk about it. So if you are cuddlier at home, there's no way you should tell the rest of the world about that, because can't have men being cuddly. That's just wrong.
Well, actually, you know, funny now we're talking about this, because that's where it only comes out really at home. Yeah, it's, I don't know if anyone else sees that, but in my head, that's how it is.
You've just outed yourself across however many listeners we've got that you're a big cuddly bear. There now. But I mean, I guess I see it, Michael. I see your softer side because, you know, you've been affected by some of the stuff we've talked about. And I'll be honest with you, it always catches me out when a man reacts that way, because, as you say, you're meant to be this one-dimensional, gruff, aren't you? Strong. You're meant to be the rock. And so whenever I see a man getting upset, it throws me off entirely.
I think also when you went to the fertility fest and we went there and we did I remember just thinking how few men were there. Mm-hmm. That was where when I met you, Michael, you and Vicky, when you came over, and that was the Shepherd's Bush, and it was we had these very small Pecha Kucha style things, and the audience was quite small there, but yeah, a handful. I think I don't even think it was that. I don't even think there were. You were there. There was maybe a couple of others. That was it. And actually, you were the only one there who I remember sharing how you felt about being there and offering the support that you did to others as well. So yeah, I absolutely, yes, you are, because just from the outside looking, the first time I'd met you and Vicky, and in fact many people I hadn't met. I think I knew Steph, maybe. I think that was probably about it. And Jodie, I didn't know anybody else. But it was just quite unique to meet someone like you who was prepared to sort of also say how it affected you, but also you were propping other people up as well, including me, which is, definitely. I think we were all, I remember having lunch the following day. We were all just sat there at the table. God knows what the waiter thought, because the whole table of us. And then I don't know, it must have been about, I think it's like 10. I can't remember. I got a photograph somewhere. I could count the number of people at the table. Not that matters. But, we were sort of like cackling with laughter. And then suddenly you just, we're just all feeling a bit like we needed propping up a bit. And that's the power of, I think, of a community, but also probably the power of having those conversations across genders. I think that matters so much. And that was kind of, that I think a big revelation, really, having that cross-gender conversation in a safe space and feeling supported like that, and having different reasons for being there, but actually ultimately sharing a very similar grief as well. I think I want to just go back, if it's all right, just digress slightly, because there was a quote I remember, and going back to what you said about the tall poppies, Andy, and it's Matt Haig, who is a parent but has written so many good books about his mental health, and I think has just made it okay to talk about stuff. Gets so much abuse on Twitter for doing that, but also an awful lot of support. And he there's a quote that I'm just trying to find it, and it's about, the world is increasingly designed to depress us. Happiness isn't good for the economy. If we were happy with what we had, why would we need more? How do you sell an anti-aging moisturizer? You make someone worry about aging. How do you get people to vote for a political party? You make them worry about immigration. How do you get them to buy insurance? By making them worry about everything. How do you get them to have plastic surgery? By highlighting their physical flaws. And how do you get them to watch a TV show? By making them worry about missing out. And how do you get them to buy a new smartphone? By making them feel they're not being left behind. To be calm becomes a kind of revolutionary act. To be happy with your own non-upgraded existence, to be comfortable with our messy human selves, would not be good for business. And that's from Reasons to Stay Alive, which is a fantastic book. And I just remember reading it at the time, and I read it recently again, given the state of how everything is and the world in which we're living in. Particularly, I think, we'd be sort of slightly biased to the UK. And the complexities of our situation, and politically, although we try to avoid it, sometimes we do have rants about it when we're not recording. I think that it's very telling that you, by making us feel that society and that pressure we have, perhaps that we need something a bit more, because ultimately, actually, to be honest, IVF is a sell. Really, at the end of the day, it's going into a seminar and being talked to by doctors in whom you place great faith that they will give you what you want, because ultimately society tells you that's what you need. You may emotionally feel that you need to be a parent, but actually if you throw money at it, maybe you've got more chance, say, than any other option. We all know, I think, the stories of how hard adoption can be, and that it isn't a just. But IVF is a sell. It's almost selling us something. And I think that gives us a pressure as well. If you think about cars and things like that, my brother and most of my family, to be honest, we want a nice car. Yeah, a good car. It's that boys' toys thing, and actually to a point, girls' toys as well. I've got caught up in it once as well, until I realised that actually, we need to take care of the planet a bit more and not do these things. But it's been such a long ingrained thing: bigger, better, more.
Yeah. There's a couple of thoughts. One was Sarah's, that being a one-dimensional rock, and I really struggled to be that rock. Like, Rach, my wife, Rach, she was finding it tough. She was being emotional. She was showing the emotions, is what I mean by that. And she took the time off she needed. She did what she needed to do, despite it not being what her work wanted. They sort of half supported her, and there was sort of discussions at the doctors what you called this grief. But she did it, and that was really good, that she took that self-care, that she recognised she needed the time out. Where I had this idea I had to be the rock, needs to keep earning, needs to keep going. I couldn't show this weakness, because then how could I support her if I was also going to cry? But all it did in the end was sort of create this person who I wasn't. And I did break, and I'd end up, you can feel it's coming up now, but I'd end up just sat on the kitchen floor upset, or I'd have too many drinks and then just be in tears. And it was a nightmare. And it was that thing of listening to what we're told we need to do or be. And so, in a sense, you're not buying anything. Capitalism isn't selling you anything here, but it is within that society, that sports company, it's telling you have to be this way to be a man. And so, in a sense, it was telling me you cope with this by drinking as well. Or at times, I started going for long runs and things like that, but it didn't really sort anything out because I wasn't actually with it. I was running away from it, and being a rock was like running away. And I thought I was helping us, but I wasn't really. I was holding certainly my process back, and in a sense, our process going forward, I think. And with, I suppose that sort of links with the thoughts around IVF as being a sell, that sense of, oh, if you do IVF, it's like where we went in Manchester, is one of the best chances in the country, one of the best ones. It's still 34%, but we saw 34% because we had naught in a sense because we'd got pregnant and we'd lost our kids. We had miscarriages, and there's this sense that through the IVF we'd get a baby, and so we did it, and it was positive test after the first one. We thought we'd done the work. For some reason, we thought what we were doing, having sex, was so different to what they were doing, which was just having sex, in a sense. And what we found out is the problem wasn't conceiving, it was the baby staying. And IVF couldn't fix that, but still we went back for a second time. And then after that, they tried to sell us a third or fourth, but we couldn't afford it. We're the only ones with a battered car in the car park. Everything else had cars probably more expensive than our house. And it is a big business, and it's still 2/3 of people come out of IVF without a baby. And it is this sense as a man that IVF looked more attractive to me than it did to rape. There's a sense that this could fix it, that if we can't have it together, if we do this, we'll somehow fix it. We'll get it right. And maybe as a man that appealed more, the practical, or that sense of I'm meant to provide. So at least if we do IVF, I'll provide this, where it was the same rotten luck, the same. It just didn't work. And I think for me, that's going back to, I guess, the worthiness, is that sense of just the need to be me. And that me, for me, is softer, is emotional. For others, it could be being loud, sort of bantery. And if that is generally who they are, then I've got no problem with that. That we need that diversity, but it's when we try to be someone we're not. And I think that was the thing that happened for the grief. And I think in a stranger, I think IVF almost sells that we're not us. If that makes sense.
It does. Did you feel that process? I can remember going in and thinking we stand more chance than anybody else. When I remember looking at the presentation, and they had, this is what we do, and this is the petri dish, and this is what happens, and we do this, we do that, and this is that, and our story, I think, is very similar probably to yours, Andy, that it wasn't the conceiving, it was the keeping the pregnancy, and that, despite God knows how many drugs I had on the last one, didn't work, and that ultimately is why I don't have children, and there's no fix for that. It's just impossible. And I'm trying to go back, and I'm trying to find it quite hard actually to go back to that time, but I can remember the presentation being there and thinking, this is a fix, this is something we can do. It felt like the fix, and despite the money, because again, like you, we had the crappiest car in the car park, we didn't get a kitchen in the house for years, we didn't go on a holiday for years, we literally just didn't, and I think it felt like, okay, we can save up, we can find money, we'll get that sorted out. We cut back. My husband ended up working overtime all hours. I barely saw him during the entire experience because he would get paid overtime. So we threw money at it because that felt like a fix we could manage somehow. And I'm just thinking that I keep going back to the fix thing repeatedly in this podcast, but it felt like it was something we could do, that, okay, we can give money and we can almost theoretically hand over responsibility to somebody else, even though actually we were handing over responsibility and a hell of a lot of intrusion into our physical, well, me particularly, but also for my husband, as it would have been with you. There is that, okay, yeah, you know, yeah, it's kind of, what's the word I'm trying to think of? They're taking away that intimacy, everything that you knew, and fixing it for you somehow, as if they're kind of rebuilding you like some sort of robot somewhere along the line. And almost you become robot. I found I was becoming robotic in my responses. You know, yes, I'm fine. Yes, this is okay. Yes, you can do the blood test. Yes, that's all right. Yeah, okay, yeah, fine, lovely. Everything felt so like it was almost become less emotional somewhere, and there wasn't that space to say, look, actually I can't do this anymore, until it was over, until I had that breathing space to say, okay, now I've got to grief, now I've got to the impossibility of it's not going to happen. But it was handing the money over and going, okay, your problem, it's not mine now. You people with your science, off you go, you know what you're doing. Yeah. And you know, and I never thought about the statistics. Didn't I don't think they even told me. It wasn't until I probably went up to Gateway Women and I spoke to Jodie Day, or read something that Jodie had written, and realised it's like, at the time when we were going through it, 76% was a failure.
Yeah, and it's that thing we notice, the positive statistics, that's the one that was printed everywhere and they told you about, but we never thought of turning that around and thinking, what's that other bigger number about? And I think it fits to what you that quote from Matt, that about we're sold everything, and IVF is another thing we are definitely sold. That this is, to me, the word fix fits it perfectly, because it is almost like we've tried the natural things, we tried some other things through the doctors, we're part of a research project, we've tried all sorts of things, and the IVF is sort of the last thing. And we got 2 lots on the NHS and we put bits towards things because we were like, oh, if you do this thing on top, then it'll improve it. But when we paid for stuff, it didn't seem to do anything. If anything, it sort of made it more difficult. And yeah, and for me, it was getting given a plastic pot and walking into a room was just, that's just mucked up in a strange thing.
Yeah.
It just makes it, that was just really alien. And it's just, here you go, and that's your bit. There's no sense of what does this feel like? What does this mean? But yeah, for the intrusion, the drugs, the effect on their body long afterwards is just, it's and you don't think of that necessarily. It just, you just so want that baby, and it's, and I think I do wonder for people like us in this situation, and future couples and single people, that if we removed IVF as an option, if it was just left as you make love, and that's it, that's your only way, would you come to a place better? Because you wouldn't have all been sold the hope. And I think IVF, that hope becomes really toxic and false. And
that is all... wow. Oh my gosh, I've never thought of that.
Toxic.
Oh my god,
that's brilliant.
Yeah,
I don't know. I've always said, God, I'm getting emotional here because that is such a big, like, wow. Oh gosh, I've always said that I was extraordinarily proud to go through IVF despite the fact it didn't work, that I threw everything about me at it, that I hate needles, I'm terrified of needles, I had some really bad experiences, and I had to go through all of the stuff of getting over that fear. And I always thought, okay, I did that, but then even now Kenny will remind me that there was something on television the other week about on the radio about mental health effects of people that have been through IVF, and something to do with just the long-term effects of the drugs that we've taken. But at the same time, I regret that some of the emotional fallout from that, because I don't know if it was the same for both of you, but I went off the rails emotionally. I was just like, Christ, I I can't even begin to explain how utterly unlike me I was. Never mind the repercussions afterwards of really, really terrible mental health. And I spoke before on the mental health episode, you know, I was quite convinced that the world was better off without me. You know, I was suicidal at one point. But at the time, the medication, because of what it does to you, I mean, it's like a false kind of, I think I remember it's like a false menopause, I think. God, we went to Cornwall on holiday, and I slept in the spare room. We went to go on holiday for a nice relaxing break, and I slept in the spare room because I was hot. The medication just made me I was just like, oh my God, I'm just, and everything irritated the hell out of me, and I couldn't sleep. I didn't sleep for a week, properly for months. I didn't sleep. Then you have the worry on top of that, and then I remember going into, and I've spoken to Steph about this because we both know the place well, but it was a pub in this place in King Sands in Cornwall, and they had some people singing, male voice choir, which is the best of times can set me off. God almighty, walked into this pub, I was just, I walked in, started singing, and I was just like floods of tears, unable to make a decision as to what it was I needed to do, which was simply just to walk out of the door and go home. That was all it required, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't physically think about what it was I had to do next in order to make myself sort of, you know, back in control, because I had lost control. I had utterly lost control, I think, mentally and physically. And to have not gone through that, yeah, that I'm going to have to live with that thought for a little while, I think, Annie, because that actually, yeah, that is just such an interesting thing to think about. Would it have been better?
I think.
No, I don't know, because obviously I didn't do IVF. I perhaps went the other way. I didn't look at the positive stats, perhaps because of everything I'd been through beforehand. So I was very cynical about it. And so when I looked at the stats for, I mean, largely based on my age and my health, I mean, it was single figures. And so I was sort of, oh, fuck that. I'm not going to put myself through it. My mental health when I was on the pill, which is a tiny, tiny fraction of what you go through on IVF when you're injecting yourself, and I guess you feel you're on last chance saloon. I just, like, my mental health wouldn't cope with that. My marriage wouldn't have coped with that. So I didn't do it. And I think the point you made there, Andy, is very on point, because I think I had to face facts far sooner than perhaps somebody that thought, I am going to go with IVF and try it out. In fact, I had a friend say to me, do you think you've tried hard enough? She's no longer a friend, obviously. But I was like, well, fuck you. Yes, I have. That's the reality. It's so much more than let's just do IVF. You know, I looked into it, I read up on it, and I was just like, there's no way I'm going to be able to cope with that mentally or physically. I've already been through so much, and my other half has too. So, no, I think you do have to deal with it sooner, but it doesn't make it any less harsh for making that decision not to do it.
And yeah, I think for us guys, because IVF is an option, if we choose to do it or not is based on our context. I suppose it was a hypothetical. I'm thinking, if it didn't exist at all, we didn't have it as an option, could it help a healing process, or could it help understanding and processing? But yeah, I'm glad we did it, because it feels like we did everything we could, and perhaps it didn't break us, but it was close. And it, not as a couple, but I think individually, that's the thing. And yeah, I don't regret doing it, but I know we did in part the second one because we knew people who it worked for. And we thought, well, the first one was so close. We had a year out in between, like a holiday, and that, we were starting to think of adoption. We'd even talked to the council, and then suddenly I was like, whoa, that's so quick. And the things they're saying you can't have your cats in your bedroom if you're going to adopt. I'm like, what? Tell our family. You haven't met our cats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You can deal with it being clawed and cried at all night. But there was that thing of, well, let's give it a go because of other news of people we knew had IVF and it worked. Or maybe it will work for us. And it was that sense of let's give it a go. And I think there that it very much felt like a last time in the last roll of the dice, and it felt different to the first time. It was almost like we're doing this because we've got this option, and it didn't quite feel right, but it was almost, well, I was desperate back then. So I was later on board than Rachel, thinking that, recognising the desire for kids, because it was there, it just buried under other stuff. And so, yeah, for us, it was the IVF, certainly the first one was the right decision. I think it was certainly the right decision the second time, because there was a sense of, could we live without knowing? We had 2 on the NHS, but if you do it or don't, you've given your best, I think. And it's just a wondering, I suppose it's thinking of me, would I have got there quicker? Would I actually have spent time processing if we hadn't have gone for IVF? Because that spreaded it out, it carried it on, it sort of made us wonder and look into things. And it's certainly that, yeah, I didn't have enough time off with our losses, and it was difficult just getting time off to do the IVF procedures. That somehow it was very much a woman orientated process. Why are you going? And all stuff like this. And it's, yeah, so I suppose, yeah, maybe there's a part of me thinking it'd have been nice to have a simpler world without all that, which is a sort of sign, I suppose, of lockdown. The world simplified, it was calmer, it was more peaceful, and I sort of realised through that I like a quiet world. I'll still buy my vinyl and book, but it is nice not to be buying, or not to be so consumed or so busy. Well, it's still somehow very busy, but it's that thing, I suppose. No, that's going off topic again, but there is a sense of, we did IVF because it's available, but is it really us? Or any couple, I suppose. It's hard, isn't it? Because it isn't intimate, isn't part of how I certainly saw it happening.
No, I'd agree with that. I also wonder whether it would change how people perceive childlessness as well. If it wasn't there, how other people would see it, whether there would be more empathy. And whether, because it wasn't there as an option, that other processes, other ways of parenting might be more, let's say, easier, but, well, yeah, easier, simplified perhaps, because that then is the path you would go down. Whether there be just more of that kind of chorus of, oh, just adopt, but yeah, without it, maybe people might, perhaps society might go, okay, well, it isn't the fix. That fix then is removed, and there would clearly be more childless people because it wasn't around. Or maybe there would be a sense of perhaps even a bigger and more vocal community, because people would be able to have, what you'd like to think, they might have more space to talk about it and to say, well, actually, it's not, we're trying, would be more acceptable than oh, we're trying, oh, we just need to relax. Maybe people might have a more of an understanding or an empathy perhaps around that. But then again, also perhaps it removes that another method of fixing. It's an interesting conversation, an interesting thought. But yeah, that simplification, I think, the same sort of thing. Again, I agree, slightly off topic, but yeah, the lockdown and the simplification of life, and actually realizing that because you don't want to go out and go to the shops because it's like a scary place to go to these days, means that actually we are spending. Well, I'm spending less. I've still got petrol in the car from when we went to Scotland on the 13th, when I filled out 13th of March. It's still in there. And I was so victorious because it was 13th of March. Okay, I realised this on the thing. 13th of March was when we last filled out. And it got to 13th of October, obviously during the week, and I'm like, yay, I've made it. I was so victorious. Whereas in the past I've been, God, really? That's just like weird, go and drive or something like that. But no, I haven't, because I haven't been anywhere. I haven't wanted to go anywhere. I haven't left the county. I haven't barely left the city. Left the city once. Otherwise I've been on my feet or I've been walking on the bike. I haven't taken, wanted to, haven't felt the need to at all. So, but anyway, that's slightly digressing, but that's simplification of life as well. And the problem is it actually leads to more people being online with their opinions as well. But we'll skip over that one maybe.
Yeah, and I know for us the IVF took so much out of us, and I can hear people, like you say, have you tried enough if you haven't done IVF, or if you haven't tried this drug, or this worked for me, you should ask for that. And then it's like, well, adopt, and you think, adopt, you have no idea how much that took out of us, and it's still taking out of us. The adoption process is far from simple. You'd have thought the sheer fact that you're going, we're broken after IVF, but we still want a kid. That says, for me, speaks volumes. It's not about grooming, it's not manipulation there. It's a genuine desire to sort of help and to have a child and give them a chance. But because the process is so difficult, it's just, I can't afford to go through it and be turned down or to break, or actually, unfortunately, because of the children in this position, they come with attachment issues because they wouldn't be there without them. And I know what they're like to try and work with as a therapist. And you think, would I be a parent, or would I end up being a therapist? And would my wife end up being a teacher, not a parent? And it's just, we weren't sure really what you'd get out of it, in a sense of, would you get the family that people say you get? And it feels like it just asks so much. And I've heard this a lot, that the adoption process takes so much that many of us chance people haven't gone there because we haven't got anything left to give, and we can't maybe face any more pain, I think.
Yeah, we looked into it, but it's, I don't know, I just, again, I kind of felt like you, it kind of felt like, would I actually feel like a parent? And I didn't have anything left to give. I don't think my other half did either. And then when we looked at the actual process, I was disappointed with the amount of judgment that you have to contend with, in terms of, if you want to be a parent, you have to jump through all these hoops. And I think I guess for me, the judgment was just one step too far, given that I'd already had someone tell me that I'd not tried hard enough, by not doing IVF. And my shattered ego just couldn't take any more, so we didn't do it. But I think, you always wonder at the back of your mind, what if we'd done X, Y, and Z? But I think there comes a point you have to start getting comfortable with the fact that you're going to be childless.
Yeah.
And in a way, moving that forward, I think, helps sometimes. That's it. And then, again, we looked at adoption, and the same reasons, didn't think we had anything to give. I thought that the process was too intrusive. We'd kind of, like, I felt that physically I'd been invaded enough. I think I felt that the only thing I had left to hold on to was my home. The four walls around me was, my bed, where I could just kind of huddle up, even though that felt like it was the scene of so many disasters, actually. And one of the things that we did do was we changed the bed, because it felt like that had just so much just disaster around it, decorated the bedroom again to start again. In fact, I think actually we moved to a different bedroom in the house. Luckily we got the space to do that, but we just moved because I can't deal with that. And I think then to have someone come in and assess our home, this place, to decorate a room that for a child that may not be there. And I don't know whether that is a thing that you have to do, but I certainly know from somebody who she'd had to go to her MP about it, the fact that they'd been refused, and she spoke to her MP, and they'd had to decorate a room in their house, and then of course it had failed, and they weren't approved, and then she went to her MP, and they had this space there, and you think, well, she hadn't been through IVF or anything, but again, there was that need to have, or desire to have a child. And I think she has since been successful, and she was approved. Her and her husband were approved, but they had to go. They were living together. They had to get married to prove that they were together. And I've heard that before, and I can't do that. And then we'd had the process of we'd spoken to them, and we'd gone to a seminar, and you know, it progressed forward. And I asked the question, does the age gap matter between my husband and I? Yes, it would have a bearing on it. And I said, would I be better off if I adopted on my own? Probably. I don't want to do that on my own. You know, making me sit here and go, okay, I've got to choose between a child and my husband with no guarantees is going to work. Again, no guarantees. There is no safety net. You know, we maybe had we have been perhaps, but I don't know. Maybe couples do that. I don't know. But again, would you really, really, really go through all of that? And it did. It crossed my mind at the time. Mm. Well, maybe that's the thing we should do. Maybe we ought to just, you know, maybe we should, because we were on that precipice of, oh my God, you know, are we going to carry on being married? Can we our relationship survive this? And maybe perhaps we need to split up. Maybe I do need to go, maybe, and God knows how that may Kenny feel. I mean,
that's just bloody cruel, though, isn't it? So people can have children. They don't have to make these decisions. They don't have to feel like they're, you know, they've got to choose between their husband and a child that isn't guaranteed. They don't have to decorate a bedroom, even when a child isn't a reality. That's just
or sign the forms in IVF, because I don't know, Andy, we had to sign forms to say that we were not, you know, molesters or going into this in some way. You have these forms, all that you have to sign off, and they're endless to go through to make sure that you are you know, you're okay, even despite the fact that they're taking several £1,000 off you for the privilege of it. You know, let's just check as well, alongside your money, that you could have laundered, frankly. They're not bothered about that bit, you know, could all be dodgy stuff, but long as you're, you know, and actually it is a signature. That's all it is.
But this is what makes me so fucking angry, you'll see. But it's like, you know, when someone says, why don't you just adopt? It's not just adopting, it's all the stuff that goes with it, all the judgment, all the invasiveness. Why don't you just do IVF? It's physically invasive and it's mentally taxing. Or why don't you just foster? Because it's not just doing something, is it? It's the mental, physical and emotional investment that you don't have to make when you can just naturally have children.
I shared a video on Walking Our Shoes about the medication, and it's still in the loft, because I still can't get rid of it. But it was all the medication from one cycle, and I think I put it on. I remember putting it on Facebook at the time, because I thought I'm going to share this shit, because I want people to know exactly what I did. This is all this stuff I took, that my husband had to overcome. Again, we're both needle phobics. It's so wretched. But he fainted. The last one nearly fainted on one of the cycles, one of the needles, because I had the needles. So it was like a big needle, boom, gone. Anyway, bless him. But yeah, all this stuff that we had to take, and it was a case of, you know, it's not just, you know, this is life changing. It changes everything, because for someone like me and Kenny, we didn't have any obvious problems that we were aware of. There were no obvious problems. When we went through all the tests and all the stuff that you go through the doctors, no obvious problems. Kenny was fine, I was fine, because you can't diagnose it at that point. You can only diagnose constant recurrent miscarriages when you've had constant recurrent miscarriages. And I've lost my train of thought here. I'm trying to remember what I was thinking about. But if you don't know what's wrong and you can't fix it, you throw everything you have at it. And I suppose that is, again, all of that medication, everything that you take for it. And I don't think people perhaps understand, maybe perhaps that in itself is quite life-changing as well. Because I know where I'm going now. Sorry, I'd forgotten completely where I was going with that. But it's that point of you go into the surgery, you think there's nothing wrong with you. You have some, preliminary stuff, and they make sure that everything's okay. And I guess at that point, you're hoping that it'll be a very small thing. IVF, it'll be okay. And I remember going to that last appointment. They said, we're going to refer you to IVF, and thinking, yay, great, excellent, good. This is going to work. I have an answer. We can do this. We're all right. We're okay. We can get this done. And telling my mum about it, or no, my brother actually, I told about it, and just said, this. I'm not going to be around for a bit because he needed some help with stuff, and this is what we're going to do. Thinking it's okay to talk about it because obviously it's going to work. Of course it's going to work. It will. So when you actually go through any process, I think anything that anyone's ever done, whether it's meeting somebody and thinking, I've met the right person, I've met my partner, my life partner, and we are going to have children, whether you're on your own and you want to go through IVF on your own and you've gone down the donor route, whatever situation you find yourself in, and all of those 100 ways that we can end up where we are, as Jodie's fantastic list says, it's still life-changing. Yet we all get this judgment. And I think maybe for women in the networks that we belong to and the Facebook groups that we're part of, we can share that, I'll go on and just say, oh God, this happened today. And of course there'll be, numerous other people will come on, women will come and go, yeah, okay, I've been there. Tell them to, F off, well, actually we swear on the podcast, don't we? Tell them to fuck off, and just get over yourself. And you'll have a million responses to that. But you very, very, very rarely hear of a man going in and saying, look, I went to work today, and one of my colleagues said that him and his wife are having a child. And I felt really shit about that. And I don't know what to do about it. And it's affecting me in this way. And even if you did reply to that was posted, the responses, I think, would be very, very different from different genders. I'd like to think that they weren't, but I think that they probably would, because although we're talking here and we have so much in common, that feeling is so very different between all of us. What you guys have gone through and how you feel about yourselves is so very different to how perhaps Sarah and I will feel, and equally how Sarah and I feel, because Sarah didn't do IVF and I did, and we approach it in different ways as well, and it's changed our lives in different ways too.
Yeah, I was thinking that judgment, I think, is part of that struggle for us men to say we are worthy as well, that it's not manly to say that, or perhaps as man, it's already assumed we live in this society we live in. But yeah, I think as a man, I didn't really get asked when you're having kids, or if people I worked with are pregnant, you sort of don't get included in the same way as a woman. So I think in terms of those groups, in terms of posting, we don't get the same triggers to talk about and then work through. So I think another reason, I think for me, why my grief process was delayed, and then why I felt unworthy was delayed, and then just got stuck with failures, because it was avoided not just by me, but by the people around me. You just don't get talked to in the same way, or told the same sort of quips of you're not trying hard enough. It does make it harder, because I think if we want to change things, we're processing, we do somehow need to become aware of them. And if we're not getting triggered at work or by friends, it's harder to do. So I can sort of see how, yeah, as a woman in those groups, you can say, oh, someone said this at work, and there's loads of people, tell them to fuck off, or yeah, that's happened here. You get that sort of belonging, you get that sense of empowering, if you like. Whereas a nan, it doesn't really happen. So I imagine if saying it client wanted to put something like, I think while we'd all get it, I don't know if there'd be many comments in the sense of, oh yeah, I've experienced that too, where if we put no one talks about it, I'd imagine a lot of men could get that more. And I think that is tricky, that we're judged in a different way, that we somehow don't care as much. Or I think maybe being a father has changed. Any parental care's come in, hasn't it, recently, like leave and things like that. So maybe in the future men will be asked about it more. But I think for Michael and I and others, we're in this middle generation where you still, if you turn out to be a good dad, that's a bit of a lucky thing rather than that's how it needs to be. And I guess that's the same as why we don't get talked about, or why we don't get asked, if you like, which is a blessing and a curse, obviously, because you don't go to get those triggers either, but you get stuck. Well, I did, at least, very much.
What about you, Michael? You've been very quiet, mate.
I've just been listening, taking it all in. Some of the things that have been going through my mind is, I really, really love the comment, Andy, about toxic hopefulness. That is brilliant, because, we were peddled, 90% success rate where we are. And Vicky was like a woman possessed. I've never seen her so focused in all her life. It was incredible. And just, it's almost like it fed off that. And she will tell you that she would have kept going if I hadn't said, let's stop. Because she wanted, and like you said, Berenice, about you're proud you did it. And she will say the same, because she said, I do not want to ever have the regret of not trying hard enough. And so, so as I said, she was like a woman possessed. It's incredible to think how it's still incredible for me to think about how possessed she was about getting this done. But the toxic hopefulness is the thing that now resonates with me, Andy. I'm going to take that. Sorry, I hope I'll get your permission to use it. And like you, Sarah, when you talked about, the adoption, the invasiveness, Andy, you said it's not an easy process, and it's not. And we were broken. And if I can get angry, one of the things that really pisses me off, and I've had this a few times now, is when people, they go through the, oh, well, did you try adoption? No, we were broken. We were absolutely fucked. Oh, have you tried fostering? Are you fucking serious? So here we are. I've just told you that we've tried our hardest to get a child, and now you're saying that, well, why don't you foster one, knowing that there's going to come a time when they're going to go? Are you fucking serious? The thing that you want most in the world, and it's going to go. So no. I think I've pissed a few people off, actually, but I don't care. So, yeah, as I said, Vicky would have kept going if I hadn't said, I can't do this anymore. I really can't do it. That emotional roller coaster was well, as you guys know, is crippling. But one of the other things is that Vicky was hyperstimulated on her last round. And so, to watch her collapse and smash her head on the tiles, and think, what it really said to me, what the fuck are we doing to you? What are we doing to you? And so I doubt there'll be any parents listening to this, but fuck, if only they understood how debilitating the IVF process is, they would probably have a lot more empathy.
So interesting to hear it from your point of view. Really, really is, because then same thing, I suppose. I was obsessed. Yeah, had the hyperstimulation as well, collapsed, all of that. I know Vicky and I talked about that when I met her, and it's just so interesting to hear you say it from your point of view, because you don't know it as a woman going through. You don't know that. You just don't know. You just keep going. I know. I was just like, I'll be fine. I'll be all right.
She was in casualty. Having an argument with the coronary doctor, saying, "I've got a fucking procedure tomorrow. I've got to be out of here." He's going, "Whoa, hang on. We got to figure out what's wrong." It was just, possessed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to carry on. I've got to keep going, and I had that disconnect, and where you somehow I always thought my brain disconnected from my body. My body was letting me down. My brain was fine. Still went through that and thought, my brain's functioning. My body's the bit that's just a bit, screwed up, but, we'll fix it. And I suppose that gave me the myth then that I created for myself, was that I was completely in control. I was fine. I knew what I was doing. All right. Yeah, I keep sticking the needles in. It's okay. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts like you never hurt. But yeah, keep going. Sitting in the car going up from Wales, pressing my head against the window pane of the car because it was the only bit that was cold, because my head hurt so much I could barely see straight. And even then I was like, I can drive. I'm fine. Okay. I'm all right. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. If I kept telling Kenny I'm all right, then he'll relent and we will carry on. Luckily, he knows me way too well. And it was a case of, and I think that must have taken all of his courage. Every single ounce of courage that he had to say, you got to stop. As I imagine it did for you. Because you're in the, you see this person that you have been married to and you've known for so long completely, I don't know, change into some monster, actually.
It's not far from the truth. It's not far from, it's a monster, but yeah.
I definitely was monstrous. Vicky's nicer than I am, but you become kind of sort of monster. That's the only way I can reflect on how I thought I was like at the time.
And it took me to cry my eyes out I still remember the day now. I was sitting on the lounge, crying my eyes out, just saying I can't do it anymore. I just can't. And that's when we drew a line in the sand, and it took us a good 10 years to get over that. Do you know what? I just thought, imagine if this was a prerequisite for someone who's going through IVF to listen to. I wonder how that would shape their decisions.
I don't think anyone would listen to it. I think it's like the bit, what was that website called? Like, oh God, something like Fertility Friends or something like that. And I think it was run by one of the clinics, I think. And I got obsessed by reading people's signatures to see if they had the same journey as I did. But in that forum was it wasn't called Moving Forwards, but Life Beyond or something like that. And it was the bit you didn't go to. It was like opening your bank balance, your bank statement when you had a really, really corking weekend. No, I'll just wait till I get paid and it looks better. I don't know that people would. I think people would just go, right, okay, no. But that said, I think there has to be something, because there isn't with any. And maybe that's the purpose of us being here, is not necessarily the prevention, but more part of I'd say cure. I would never want to think that any of us who work in this field and offer this support would ever want to say that they're a cure, but it's perhaps helping people learn to live with the journey that they've taken, so that they know that there's no shame in that.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, isn't it? I think the transition from trying to accepting that you're not anymore is a very difficult one. And I think it's lonely as well, because you don't realise there's people out there that have already done it before you. But I remember being at the fertility show last year, as After the Storm. And some people would actually sort me out and were like, yeah, I want to come talk to you because I want to know there's something beyond this, because I don't think it's going to work. And I'm starting to realise that. But there was one lady in particular that walked semicircles round my stall and just fell apart and said, I really didn't need to see you here. And it's kind of like, unfortunately, it's the reality, isn't it? I got obsessed. I was very obsessed to the detriment of everything else. Everything else stopped, but for me, being a mum. And when that didn't work, you then got to try and pick up all the pieces and find out who you are again. And we were talking about roles earlier, and male roles and who we are if we're not going to be mums. And I think that's incredibly difficult once you've got to accept that actually it's not going to happen for you.
So can we swing this in a different direction now? In that, I think, are we in a position to be able to talk about examples of, who we are now? Can we inject a positive into this somehow and talk about how do we find that next life that,
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I've got a few ideas. So if you want to make it more personal, if Andy, you want to talk about PhD, and maybe because I think it would be good to balance it, because it looks like we've bashed IVF, which is great.
Yeah.
And I really think it's something that probably, look, from the conversation, it's probably something that Andy, Berenice, and I probably needed to do. Mm. In that respect, not discounting your experience, Sarah, but it's probably what we all needed to do, get it off our chest and bash it. But so a positive, help me out.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to go with, Michael. I agree. Yeah.
Because one of the things I think about a lot, and there's a couple of guys who put in the Clan of Brothers about, there's a gentleman in the United States who is a fire chief, I think he was, Andy. It was a few months ago now. But he talked about, well, I don't know who I am now. I don't know who I am. And I think it would be good if we could, either use our own experience or examples of other things about, how to, I guess it's like Jodie's plan B, what's next. So, I've got some very specific examples.
Can I just stop in with one very quick comment here, an observation?
Go.
That
yes,
still husbands, partners, still valued. I'm going to go with that one just to kind of kick it off, because I think that that's so important, that nobody who I've met, male, female, anyone, is less than the person that they were for what they've gone through. My husband isn't less of a person to me because of what he's been through. I think that if I met your husband, Sarah, I would think he would be quite an interesting and amazing person, just because, he's married to you, and so he has to be. And I think it's the same with you, Michael. It's true, it's just the thing, we all have friendships, we have something in common, but that is it. We're not less than. And I always love speaking to you, Michael. You're a really, really good friend, and I really value who you are. And it's the same with you, Andy. We have some fantastic conversations on Twitter and things like that, and I really am pleased that you're here today. So I don't think that anyone is less than that in anyone's eyes. No one's less of a husband, less of a partner to somebody.
I think Rach definitely says that about me, and I definitely think about her, that we're not less than because we're not parents. But it's trying to see yourself through other people's eyes at times, because for me it's like, I don't think I were perhaps as obsessed as Michael described Vicky and you described yourself, Berenice. I think I would have, if we had the money, I'd have pushed for a third one, but I could see something in Rach, and it was just, I can't do that to her. That's not right. But that was more of my need of needing to to fix it, to get it right, because I didn't feel good enough about it. And so actually being able to stop is perhaps a nod towards where I wanted to go. We've done everything we can. It's time to just become ourselves again, because we were ourselves, but we've become swamped by this one part of us who wanted to be mum and dad. And so I think Chance and Michael things, it's hard to say, because I've sort of been how I am. I've always found it hard to sort of think I matter, or I put myself first and that's okay. And I think for me that's part of this legacy agency. I've never really thought about it, because think of others first. I somehow will just work things out. And Michael mentioned my PhD, and the PhD is a bit of a plan B, but it's also, it seemed like a good thing at the time, and I fell into it. Not like you do fall into it, because there's a lot of work to get it and to get funding. But I tell myself I fell into it. I don't recognise the amount of reading I did to apply and to do the interview was probably equivalent of half a master's, and I did it while working in counselling. I just sort of somehow discount that. So I think for me, I'm still getting there with liking myself, with being positive, with seeing there's life beyond this. Because obviously there is, because I'm now doing a PhD, I'm still offering therapy with a charity where we work with sexual abuse and violence. So it's not an easy topic. It's difficult work, but it's life affirming. It is rewarding. It is odd to say it's enjoyable. And then beyond that, before lockdown, I was part of a running group, and they're still running, but I'm not, because my fitness has dropped. But there is a lot more to my life, and it's like I've found the joys of cycling again. I've got a road bike, and I sort of wish I didn't grow up in Norfolk, because the hills around here are killers. But there is a sense that there is more to it beyond kids, really, that even if I'm still struggling with saying, wow, I'm doing a PhD, that I must have something about me, or I must see this topic in a way that someone else believes in and is supporting with it. And I'm currently recruiting, and the amount of feedback I've got from organisations that, wow, what a cool project, we really need this, and we'll try to do what we can to help you. It's almost like I can't take it. It's like, that doesn't fit with this view of myself. But in time, hopefully, and certainly by the end of the PhD, I want to be sort of matching that same wowness of it, and that it's okay for me to think of myself in a way of, wow, I'm doing something that seems to be striking a chord, and hopefully can make a bit of a difference somewhere. And I think the counselling makes a difference to people, and I think the running does. And part of my thing was, before we locked down, I was at uni, I was trying to start a running group for well-being, and just sort of no sense of distance. It's just about a bit of going out together as time. It could be pottering, depending who's there, they could go quicker and come back. There's all sorts of things. And I guess, yeah, so again, that's about helping others, but there's something in there that we aren't just defined by our kids. That for me, the positives are that life hasn't stopped. I haven't given up. I haven't lost myself in following cricket, drinking too much beer, letting the guitar get too dusty, not buying a bike. I've kept going, even if it's been really difficult, really tough. And so I suppose it's that not giving up on myself is maybe the biggest positive that I can be with. That it's not necessarily the PhD, it's not necessarily the work I do and the hobbies I'm involved in, and even buying the big issue and subscribing to that, which is in part Berenice's sort of encouragement, as well as to do with Street Cat Bob. But it's like actually becoming more active in the environment and social. They're all great things, but I think the proudest thing I'm actually earned is I don't give up. There's something in me that says, I'm not giving up on this. That this, for me, this is it. This is our life. There is nothing else. So if there's nothing, then you can do anything within your constraints. And I think part of my work is trying to improve those constraints for everyone, and for us all to respect each other's sort of space, so we can live alongside ourselves, but as a community. So the individualism isn't about just looking after yourself, it's being you, but as part of a community. And that's what I like about the Childless, is that finding new guys when I sort of appeared on Twitter talking about it, or finding the Facebook groups, and then with Michael getting the Clan of Brothers going, and that feels like really important. That feels like a community where people are themselves, but we've also got something in common, and we're also helping each other, and we respect if we can talk about it at one point, we can't at another, or we seem to go quiet and disappear and then come back and more active. And so, yeah, I suppose for me, just the positive is don't give up, I suppose, if that makes sense. Without it, obviously, that takes time to get to, or when there's something about me somewhere that I don't do it, that I think there's more. But it doesn't mean it's easy, and doesn't mean I don't suffer, and I don't want to just sometimes sit on the floor and cry and think, bang my head against the wall sort of thing. But I think because I don't give up, there's certainly a potential as I move through my 40s and onwards that life can be as great as it would have been if we had kids through that time. Yeah. That's me.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
I what I'd like to happen, Andy, is for you to listen to what you've just said, probably in a few weeks' time when we've done the edit, and in the cold light of day, you've just talked about all the things that you do. I mean, I've such admiration for you for what you do, and I'm lost for words right now, in that, fuck, I don't know what to say. It's in my head, it's there, but you're a great guy. There you go. That's the best I can do right now, Andy. But I have such admiration for you for what you do.
Thanks, Mike. That does mean a lot, and I'm really fighting not just to brush it off, but to take in what you say. And I do hear that people of that thing of what I do, and then I go, oh, but I'm not good enough. I think it just don't add up.
I wish I was there. I wish I was there now to give you a big hug and shake you on the shoulders and go, fucking listen to yourself. Listen to yourself.
I know what you mean, and you obviously don't say that to other people who are struggling, but there is a part of me that has said to myself, enough's enough. For fuck's sake, just snap out of it.
No, I'd never say that, but I just want you to go, listen to yourself.
Yeah. But that's the thing, I can say that to myself. I've never said to someone else because it's so contextual what we go through and what we're doing. But I feel like things are sort of just building that really this is enough of just sort of sabotaging my world. That all the things that have been difficult, there'd be so many reasons for it. There's lots of it that's nothing to do with me, but wrong place, or just people's best didn't quite match mine or what I needed, that sort of stuff. But so it is a sort of, I tell my clients all the time they matter, and we work through like how they work, and it's like I'm only at times on the same page. I'm not some guru. And I think maybe that's part of the reason I can do the work I do, that there is that humanity in there, that somehow they recognise there's something that I've gone deep in my own stuff, that I'm there for them. But it is sometimes I think, why haven't I just done that final piece of work? What's stopping you embracing the sort of life? You don't live fully actualized, or number 7 or whatever it is on your spectrum of how people actualize, how people develop. But why can't I just enjoy where I'm at and be content enough? And that's the thing. That's where I'd like to work. But I think the not giving up means I'll get there. And I think I wouldn't be part of the clan. I wouldn't be helping there. I wouldn't be doing these things and offering my time here if I didn't feel like it's rewarding, it gives me something, and it hopefully offers someone else stuff. And I think it is just listen to myself. You're right. I like that. Yeah.
But I think it's Andy, it's a great. I mean, you're very eloquent. I think it's a great example of, people who are not as far along the path to acceptance may be able to get hold of and say, okay, Yes, when none of us have said it's easy,
Mm-hmm.
but there is hope, and not the toxic hope, but there is hope.
Yeah, because it feels like we don't sell the future, the plan B, the next chapter. We just say it's possible, but we recognise it is hard work, and that will come from difficult places. And it doesn't mean the future's going to be perfect, but whose future is going to be anyway? Even with kids, it doesn't mean you set up for life, but it's almost like the grass is greener, isn't it? So it's about, in a sense, tending to our garden, and that's the thing that I'll perhaps neglect at times. And maybe that is the thing where I'm trying to focus more on, and that is doing stuff like this helps in that way, because it's sort of hearing from you that I just want to give you a hug and tell you to just be you, and it's actually, that means a lot. And I think, that's the sort of thing that helps me sort of click a bit further on. And I think that's the positive in it. We're trying to help each other out as well. That's another big positive of coming out of childlessness. Is doesn't mean there isn't a community for you. Doesn't mean there isn't a family or a home for you.
Exactly. Yeah. So what do you girls think? What I guess if you were to talk, similar to Andy, what would what's your thoughts
about ourselves, or about
yeah
God?
What has got you? What are the positives that got you here?
I'm terrible at my self-worth.
We all are.
I'm shocking. I'm terrible at that. I don't know. I would struggle to come up with anything of any merit, I suppose, to be honest. I sort of feel sometimes I'm still stuck somewhere and not perhaps as far along as I ought to be. But if we're thinking of positives, which is what you've asked, and not for me to go back and some kind of morbid self-reflection, then I would say that the master's degree. I'm too terrified to do a PhD. I've kind of dropped out of it for too long to begin. I did think about it before the lockdown again, and I keep thinking about it. And I've lost the language. I think I somehow seem to have lost the academic language, but I'm okay with that. I'd like to. I think I need pity because I just want to have a doctor. Dr. Smith would be quite cool. I'm quite open to sort of saying that rather than the hard work. I could probably buy a dodgy certificate somewhere, couldn't I, on the internet? Anyway, but I did a master's. I didn't think I'd be able to do that, and I stood up in front of people and explained a bit more of my journey. And I would say that that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of, because I've stood up and said, this is what happened. Sometimes I'll be honest and say for shock, because I think people sometimes just need to get a grip and understand this stuff. I think the podcast is a huge part of that, and I think that's probably the thing that's probably changed me the most, in the sense that I value the collaboration, I think, as much as anything else, and the friendship that I've made within both the podcast but also outside of the podcast too. There's friendships, I think, that will remain in place, I hope, lifelong, really, because there is something, regardless, and I keep saying this, that this isn't a podcast about IVF or past that. It's a podcast about everything post childlessness. No subject is left undiscussed. I think anything goes. And meeting people who have found themselves in a position that's different, in this position that's in a way that's different to mine, the journey is different rather, it's been eye-opening and rewarding and incredibly emotional. But I think it's made me realize that we also have so much in common, and you can still have those friendships, and they're very important. So yeah, speaking out has been a big part of it. I guess getting a dog, that's been quite good. And learning that, she's a dog and not a surrogate child. if anything, I just call her my girlfriend. Definitely not a child, I suppose. Yeah, I think they're the kind of the things, I suppose. And just learning to sort of settle down with it a bit, that not every day is a trigger, that there are actually some quite good days in all of this. Yeah, I think that's probably all I'm struggling, because I'm terrible at this. I constantly sort of think, oh, well, but actually you just have to dig a bit deep sometimes and get prompts from people like you that put you in a sort of, oh God, I can't think of anything. But yeah, I'd say that speaking out, communicating probably is the thing that's been most important to me.
It's interesting when you say communication, because one of the things that Vicky and I, there's many things we say about you, and they're all good. But one of the things that you should do audiobooks, because you have a lovely voice, and Vicky goes, I could listen to Berenice all day.
Yeah.
I love listening
bless
to her.
you. I always think I'm like the third wheel, really, in all of this. That's the thing I bring to the podcast now, is the voice.
You need to be the Harry Potters. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I do read to the dog, I have to say. Can I confess that? I've just confessed it. But I sit here and she's sort of like getting a bit kind of like, oh, I'm going to go and run around the house like an idiot. And she's actually quite tired. And you know that actually it's the tired Zoom. It's a bit where, Moles, you need to just quit that and sit down and be a normal dog. Please God, be a normal dog. And I get a book out and start reading too. And she's like, oh, okay, I'm going to come and sit down and I'm going to listen to you. And you think, oh dear. So yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a lovely thing to say. I'm not sure any of it makes sense, but yeah.
Well, and not only the other fact that that Vicky would probably jump at the chance of living with you and having a artist studio somewhere in Cornwall.
I know, that's our plan. Or France, the turret in France, please.
Oh, yeah.
I quite fancy that too. I don't necessarily want to stay in this country right now, so therefore France would be fine. And New Zealand, frankly, would be quite nice right now. But I think that's it. And again, that is the power of friendship, isn't it? I've only met Vicky once, and yeah, friend for life. I hope so, because I think she's just amazing. I think she's incredible. I think she's so talented. And we spoke about this yesterday on the coffee chat, that I just admire her talent and her ability. I really, really do. And I hope that we'll always be friends forever. I really hope so. Even though we're miles and miles apart, I really hope so, because she's fantastic. Though I worry that you talk about me. Talk about someone else.
Okay, Sarah.
Darling. That's lovely. Sarah, you go.
It's your turn now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it might be. I think when it happened to me, I threw everything up in the air and waited for it to land, and I've totally changed. If I'm honest, you probably wouldn't recognise me if you met me before the fertility shit show. I certainly didn't swear as much, which I absolutely fucking adore, I have to say. But no, I think for me, I think it has been finding the community. I think that's really, when I think back to when I was sort of just Googling, trying to find something, and the only thing I could find was Jodie, and I went and did that weekend. It's like, oh wow, there are other people out there like me, not the same backstory, but the same people struggling with the same, shitty outcome. That for me, I think, was my saving grace, and that's what really motivated me to go up and say, actually, I'm not happy with anything in my life. Jim aside, my other half aside, everything for me, nothing worked. I had this massive sense of dissatisfaction all the way through. Couldn't find people that I connected with, and I've been, if there is a positive, then it has been finding friends and people that I connect with, albeit for a rather horrible backstory, and the fact that they are struggling too with their childlessness. So I think for me, that's something I'm immensely proud of. I was very introverted, very, very shut down before all of this, and now I talk about all my backstory and everything on a podcast. It's out there on the World Wide Web. I'm very open about it. I think I shock my friends from beforehand. They don't really recognise who I am now, because I'm so different. But that's thanks to meeting people like you guys and being able to share, the shittiness, but realise actually there is joy and friendship out there if you want it.
No, I was just going to say that I still haven't forgotten the very first time we did a recording.
Oh.
And you talk about you want to be your feisty nan, and I can see I could just see you blossoming into that woman. And I just really love the way that you question, the way that you deliver questions is awesome.
God, yeah, I'm terrible with that.
I am in awe.
Yeah, me too.
And I mean this in a good way, but fuck, you make me feel inadequate when you start that shit.
Yeah, seriously. I know, me too. Well, it's like you tell a yarn like you do, Michael, and I'm like, oh, Michael's doing the yarn thing, and then there's Sarah going like, boom, with the questions, but in such a really good way. It's like, why, when you say something, I think, oh, why do I not think that? Why? Oh, and yeah, how do you not think about that? And you always stay on track. Whereas I think that Michael, you and I, we tend to go off on little rambles around. Finally, Sarah brings us back to the point of what we're meant to do with the question. Although actually you've been quite good with the questions today, Michael, I have to say.
Yeah.
And Andy, of course, that question. Toxic hope.
Yeah.
Fuck, that's brilliant.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
But I think just the whole chat that we've just had is a fantastic example of how it can be better. That we trust the community, you trust the people in your community because you know that they have been, as Sarah puts it, that shit show, regardless of the detail. We've all been through it. And I think it's, if there's a takeaway from this is that, to our communities, trust each other and speak out. And one of the other things is, is be part of it. Because, we've all talked about being part of it has helped us. And I think that's a takeaway from this.
Yeah, trust in others. And I think that actually thinking about that is how often we can share or think we can trust others and they let us down because they may have judgments that they make that can be our own, our families, our friends we thought that would understand. And then you have to kind of step into this arena where you may not know people that well, because the friends that you've grown up with from school or you I don't know, you shared a house with or whatever, have gone on to have children. And then you have to find someone new to talk to, and who the hell, and you don't know who they are, really, when you think about it. You don't know that much about them, and there's still lots of gaps in other people's in friendships I have in our community where I don't necessarily know where people might live, or I don't know their address. I can't send them a card or something like that, whereas I could send my relations a card. I know where they live, I can pop around their house. But actually, logically, that doesn't necessarily matter that much. If you're talking to each other and you're providing that extra level of trust and that listening space and just that empathy, then it doesn't matter if you don't send them a card. You're talking to them. You're giving space. Those physical gestures that we make, particularly now, actually, when you think about it, we can't hug each other. We can't. Perhaps I know lots of people don't want any post at the moment because they're worried about all of that sort of thing. And I can understand that. We're all being a bit more cautious, so we're having to speak a lot more in difficult circumstances. And in some ways, long may that continue, because I think we're all perhaps being a little bit more, hopefully a little bit more open, a bit more honest. I think the success of World Childless Week this year only goes to show that. And the podcast as well, stats moment, you know, how we're all growing as a podcast. It's important, that space and that trust.
So we haven't asked Michael yet, have we?
No, Michael. Oh, she's killer question. There she is. Dun, 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 dun. You knew. Sarah had not forgotten.
Just gonna say, guys, like, yeah, I agree totally with all that. This is a safe space. I know I talk more here than I do with friends who I've known obviously a lot longer, because, as Sarah puts it, you know the shit show. So that really does help. But no, I can't wait to hear what Michael says his positives are about our community and what he's learned and what he offers now after being childless.
I'll put it this way. Vicky and I had a conversation. Here's a story coming, Berenice. Vicky and I had a conversation the other day. It was around the childless community. And she said, how do you keep doing it? How do you keep being part of it? Doesn't it make you sad? Because it does her. She's like this sponge that just soaks up everyone else's sorrow. And I said, no, it doesn't. It doesn't make me sad, because I know that I have this great belief that the more we talk about it, the easier it becomes, the better it becomes. But it's not just about me; it's about everyone else out there looking for some type of inspiration, and that's a lot of the feedback that I get from our community is, thank you for bringing this up. Thank you. It's really refreshing to see this. And so I get a lot of satisfaction from that. As I said, I get a lot of satisfaction from being part of this community, and the more of us that can support each other, the better this community will be. And I have a very, very, very strong belief of that, because we as a community can do some great things for those who come behind us. And that's my focus, is for those. What do we leave when we leave this earth? And I'd like to think that we can make it at least a little better. And so that's what gives me a lot of satisfaction, is that. And I have a lot of satisfaction from all the friends that I've made. I friend as much as our community as possible, because and they won't all be close friends. They will be, we have, let's say, circles of friendship, and those who wish to be in the the inner circle, because it's not really my choice. It's if they wish to we communicate, so I would like to think that we are in the close circle, and others would perhaps not want that. They're happy to watch, but I get a lot of satisfaction from connecting with people, and knowing just that little bit of connection will make a difference. And I don't want to say that as a as arrogance, but I just believe that that connection will make a difference. And so that's why I am so overt with my social media as an example of that. Someone will get something from it. And that's why I'm a big believer in social media, because the more people I friend, someone, will get something from me being a dickhead one day. And I don't mind admitting that, all my failings as well. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
Totally.
It does.
Totally.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say is just that I think over the time that I've known you, and also Andy as well with you too, that how much you've both grown. I think that that's an example, really, Michael, of where I think the power of you speaking and sharing and being so expressive, I think, and giving that space leads to that. I think other people have followed you in that, and again, I think with you, Andy, as well, you know, the way that I've noticed when we were first on Twitter, and how you've changed the way that the words that you're sharing, and it's so nice to see that, both you and actually Robin as well. I have to say the big, you know, kudos to Robin Hadley here for all that he does as well. I think that there's this core community, and I would say that the three of you very much a part of that. That you're allowing other people that space by kicking those conversations off yourself and your research and your actions, and I think they're so utterly invaluable. Really they are. I mean, as I've always said to you, Michael, I thought, you know, and I always knew that you had an interest in podcasts, and to actually do a podcast with you is a huge privilege. It really is. It's always a privilege to do a podcast episode with you.
No, thank you. I just hope I have this conflict in me that I hope that I want to set a good example.
Mm-hmm.
No, I want to lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just an everyday gruff bloke that, you know, but I hope I set a good example.
You know,
your everyday gruffness and who. No, you're not. But if you're going to go and use that descriptive, then I think that is an honest descriptive, if that's how you perceive it. But also, it's accessible.
Yeah. You
know, you are accessible to so many people, you know, which is so important to our audience. I think, you know, it's time and time again, you know, it's mentioned the dynamics, but the dynamics wouldn't work, I think, if you were not part of that, because you have an accessibility. I know when I said, you know, Kenny's listened to the podcast and it appeared occasionally, but you're accessible to him because of who you are. I think that's it. And everybody, I think, that does stuff in our talks in our community has different things that they do. You know, we have Helen, who is so creative, who's on the podcast last month, and we've had Muriel, and we've had Victoria, we've had Yvonne and her guests as well. We have so much diversity and so much accessibility, which is the power of a podcast. But we have to lead by example and say, okay, we can't do everything. We can't answer all the questions. We have to bring other people in to have those conversations sometimes, but we can sit and we can lead by example, whether that's because we swear like troopers, we get angry, we get sad, we laugh, sometimes inappropriately maybe, but yeah, and we support each other, and we can't do that unless it's friendship. And again, the podcast is very much, I think, about trust in our audience, that they understand and know that we're doing it for the right reasons, and trust in each other that, you know, when we're presenting something, and with our guests, as we've done with Andy here today, that we can carry those conversations on. It's a legacy, it's a footprint for something else, you know, and I hope that in years to come people will go back and go, oh yes, the Full Stop podcast.
Thanks for staying the distance on this marathon chat, but we thought it was important that we capture it all. Now please don't forget that we are also on the Trinity of Facebook, Insta and Twitter, and all of those links can be found on our website www.thefullstoppod.com, where you can register for our newsletter so you can keep up to date with what we're up to. We would also appreciate if you could rate us on the platform you use to listen to the podcast. The more ratings we get, the wider our spread and the more of our community we can reach. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast or have a burning issue you think our community should be aware of, we have a form on our website that you can fill in to give us the details. Now, don't forget, we love hearing from our audience, so please drop us a line anytime, be it email, Insta, or our personal Facebooks. Or join us for our coffee mornings you'll find on the website event sections. And as always, it's important for us to let you know you are not alone.
Jenny Joseph, When I'm an old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me, and I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say with no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired, and I shall gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells. And run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week and hoard pencils and pens and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But ought I not to practice a little now, so the people who know me are not too shocked and surprised why I am old and I start to wear purple?